This week on Dark Tower YouTube, we get to catch up with our old friend Jake. Kinda, sorta. We witness the world's greatest and probably only penicillin heist. And we watch Roland faint, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Welcome back, friends. My name is Michelle McEwen. I am the host of Dark Tower YouTube, where we're taking a deep psychological dive into the magic, the mystery, and the metaphysics of Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. We are finishing up the drawing of the 3 this week, and it's my favorite. It's just my favorite. The whole section with Jack Mort and the shenanigans and the drawing are just incredible, and I want to read the whole thing to you and then just stop and pause and talk about it. But we don't have 15 hours. I mean, I guess we do. Maybe at some point. That'll be my next show, just actually reading the whole book. But we're going to pull a lot out of this section. This will be 2 parts, so this will be part 1 of 2 of section 5 of the drawing of the 3. So excited to get started, realizing that as I move forward with this show, I'm going to have to do smaller sections because I'm taking such a deep dive that it's consuming my life, which is awesome, but also it's way too much for 1 episode at a time. So figuring it out, ironing out the kinks as I deliver the goods. Let's get started. Bitter medicine is where we start the pusher section. And here we get to see who is behind door number 3. It is Jack Mort. And Roland steps into his consciousness. We're familiar with this, the way this works at this point. And did any of you think about Jake when Stephen King is saying, when Eddie felt Roland come in and when Odetta felt Roland come in, but Jack Mort didn't notice at all because he was too focused on watching the boy. And the boy, it could just be any boy, but I'm just wondering, I don't think the first time I read it, I realized that's who we were talking about, but it's right there, kind of. Because I remember just being gobsmacked when Stephen King is like, oh, did you miss it? Because, yeah, it's that boy. Yes, that one. And this is all just like way too much for Roland. So he's like, because he thinks, and we think, that the man in black pushed Jake into traffic and killed him. And so Roland rightly is going, oh my God, I'm inside of the man in black, and this is the worst punishment I could even dream of, is being inside of my arch nemesis and killing this child again. And he comes forward all the way and prevents that push from happening. He realizes that this is not the man in black. So that brings up some questions for all of us, and we're thinking, well, okay, hang on, let's rewind and go back to the part where Jake was telling us about this. He thought the man in black pushed him. The man in black was there, that's a fact, because he saw him coming over with the dressed like a priest and giving him the act of contrition. So that's real. He just assumed that that was who pushed him, but it was behind him, so how could he even really know? So I think it's okay. It makes sense for there to be a little misdirection there. I don't know if King knew this when he wrote The Gunslinger, maybe not, but I think it's fair. I think it's fair play to say, oh, we just made an assumption based on Jake's story. But if he didn't know, then how could we know? Anyway, it's not him, but all of this is like a lot for Roland, and then he's kind of in Jack Mort's consciousness and kind of seeing the connection between Jack Mort and not only Jake, but also Odetta twice. It's too much. And our gunslinger, our big, tough, manly gunslinger, faints from the overwhelm of it all, which tells us how big a deal it is. I don't think Roland has fainted in this book, in this story. I don't think so. He might have lost consciousness, but not just dead out fainting. So there we have it. There's faint number 1. And now what happens next, Michelle? Oh, we have this cool part about when Roland's having this realization. It's not Walter, and it's okay, and kind of figuring out what's going on. King writes, divorced of his body, his mind, his ka, was as healthy and acute as ever. But the sudden knowing struck him like a chisel blow to the temple. And so the knowing was about the idea that Roland thinks he's the third one drawn. So we'll talk about that. But first, the Ka. Anytime Ka's brought up in this series, I think we should talk about it here on Dark Tower YouTube. So here we have Ka used, kind of reinforcing the way that we saw it used at the beginning of this story. So back in the Gunslinger, introduced to Ka, and it was like destiny, fate, a place you had to go, perhaps. And then in the drawing of the three, we had Roland using the idea of his Ka inside of Eddie Dean. And that made us say, oh, well, that's a little different. So Ka can look very different, actually. And here it's more of the idea of spirit, soul, life force, etc. And this is like a doubling down on that, saying Roland's not in his body anymore. His mind, his Ka, was as healthy as ever. And that's cool because, first of all, we looked at the ancient Egyptian roots of Ka and found that it is about one's life force, a particular kind of life force. And you can go back and rewatch that if you want to, but just remember that that happened. And here it's kind of like, yes, that's what we're talking about, Roland's life force. So King, knowing about ancient Egyptian Ka, I think for sure is a thing. Also, it's his Ka that makes him a gunslinger. His Ka, his mind, is all him. It's all Roland inside of this other body, but it's all him. And so he makes Roland's body a gunslinger. And he needs that body. And like, probably when it's not on death's doorstop, it's probably a pretty nice body. At least I like to think so. But it's not really what makes Roland Roland. So I think that's interesting to think about. And then we think about that for ourselves. And who is Michelle? Like, this is Michelle's body. But what about my consciousness, my psyche, my mind? Isn't that what makes me me? And I animate this body. But if you gave me another body, it would still be me in there. So cool things to think about on the metaphysical level. Now, this is what Roland thinks he knows. He has this realization. King writes, "The third was not this man, this pusher. The third named by Walter had been death. Death, but not for you." That was what Walter, clever as Satan, even at the end, had said. A lawyer's answer, so close to the truth, but the truth was able to hide in its shadow. Death was not for him. Death was become him. The prisoner, the lady, death was the third. He was suddenly filled with a certainty that he himself was the third. Okay, but at the end of the book, Stephen King says that Susanna is the third, drawn from the other two, Odetta and Detta. And so, what? Who's right here? But could it just be Eddie and Susanna and Roland as the third, as death? And he is performing death in this section of the book. I think it brings an interesting question up, which we've been kind of wondering about a little bit in terms of how reliable is Roland as a narrator? When he's telling us things from his perspective, not Stephen King, the omniscient narrator telling us things that are happening, he's just telling the facts, man. But Roland, we love Roland, but he's not thinking straight all of the time. And he's wrong. And he makes bad judgment calls. We've seen that happen once in a very, very awful way, but several times we've been like, that maybe isn't what he should have done there. So when Roland has this certainty. It's just a little tricky because we've been told that his intuition, his instinct is good and he should trust that. So here it's like, is he the third? I don't know. I think it's kind of like, it's probably Eddie, Susanna, Roland. Who are the drawing of the three? That's what I'm asking y'all. Who are the three? Tell me in the comments. Who was drawn? Who are the drawing of the three? Is Roland accurate here? Is he right? Is he sure that he's the third one to be drawn? Because how can he draw himself? Lots of questions. Right, what else is going on here? The language. Death was not for him, death was become him. Did that snag anybody's brain? Because when I was reading it, I was like, wait, huh? That's weird. That's a weird way to put it. What does that really mean? I guess it means he is going to enact death, but you don't hear that very often, not even from Roland of Gilead. So I dug a little bit, and it turns out that this verbiage, it's like, but it's verbiage because it's a verb, becoming, but it's also verbiage, but I am become, famously quoted by Oppenheimer after watching the atomic bomb test for the first time. I know there was a movie made about this and I never saw it, so maybe, probably, I'd be surprised if it weren't, but that quote is in that film. And Oppenheimer said, ooh, I lost it. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Whew. And that's like probably the right thing to say after you watch the atomic bomb explode. But he didn't originate that. He didn't say that. He stole it. You know where he stole it from? The Bhagavad Gita. So this holy book of Hinduism, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's Buddhist. I can't remember. It's one of those two major religions. Sorry. And the Bhagavad Gita has that exact quote, and it's the story of one of the princes is talking to another prince about some kind of warfare. You know, it's always the same story in the Bibles. It's like they want our land and God's on our side and all of this. And so that's from the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. But cool in the Bhagavad Gita, cool that Oppenheimer said it, also seems to fit this story very nicely, because whenever I see the word worlds, I think of Jake and I think of other worlds. So the plural use of the word worlds there, destroyer of worlds, that's kind of cool. And now I am become death. I mean, Roland does say that, but we haven't heard him say that before. But that kind of language just fits the Gilead thing. And you know why? Another reason is because it's also in the Bible. And we saw so much of that biblical influence in The Gunslinger. Not so much in this book, but here perhaps is a little slice of that, where that idea of I am become is used in the Bible a few times. I'm not going to give you every single one, but just a taste, if you will. In Genesis, I believe this was Jacob saying, I am not worthy of the least of all thy mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. And in the book of Lamentations, which is not a fun book, as you might expect, not just a clever title. All her people sigh, they seek bread, they have given their pleasant things for meat to relieve the soul. See, O Lord, and consider, for I am become vile. So I find that usage, it has a certain ring to it that fits Roland and Gilead. I like the biblical parallels there. And also the idea of time here with that verb, I am become, because it's kind of getting at this idea of I am becoming and I already am at the same time when you hear I am become. And that's not possible, except it is when we're in the present moment of now, because that's the only moment that there really is, because you say, well, no, it's not. That's the past. Where? It's now. It's the past. It was the past. No, it's still now. Oh, the future's coming. No, it's right now. It's always right now. And the Dark Tower is this nexus of space-time. And you would think that the idea of the now moment, which means that all worlds are actually spinning in the now moment, and every single life, past lives, no, it's now lives, just different versions of you living out different things. And maybe if you kind of align differently, you could become that version of yourself. I am become. I already am that, because I have to be that in the now moment, because this is the only moment that exists, but also I am becoming because I haven't experienced it. It's unfolding in this illusion of time. So I love all of it. I think it's a nice fit for our story. Who knows if Stephen King is aware of that, but he does know his Bible after all. He for sure knows about Oppenheimer. Does he know about the Bhagavad Gita? Probably. So that's that. Okay, we're going to go back to the story, and we're going to see King popping up again as not that kind of omniscient third person, just telling us what is happening. This is who's doing what, this is what they're thinking. But remember, he popped up and he was telling us something that nobody else could know in the story, that Roland was thinking about these questions. What was it? I can't remember. But it was like Roland never even thought to think that question. It just wasn't in his nature. Remember that? And then we were like, oh, but we're supposed to ask that question. Roland's not asking it, but King's like, you should be asking that question. So we're going to see the same thing happening here. King writes, oh, and this is about, he went into Jack Mort and didn't push Jake. So what are the consequences of that? King writes, thoughts of what might happen if he stopped the man in black from murdering Jake did not come until later. The possible paradox, the fistula, in time and dimension, which might cancel out everything that had happened after he arrived at the way station. For surely, if he saved Jake in this world, there would have been no Jake for him to meet there, and everything which had happened thereafter would change. What changes? Impossible even to speculate on them. That one might have been the end of his quest never entered the gunslinger's mind. And surely such after-the-fact speculations were moot. If he had seen the man in black, no consequence, paradox, or ordained course of destiny could have stopped him from simply lowering the head of the body he inhabited and pounding it straight through Walter's chest. Roland would have been as helpless to do otherwise as a gun is helpless to refuse the finger that squeezes the trigger and flings the bullet on its flight. If it sent all to hell, the hell with it. So Roland didn't think not pushing Jake could be the end of all of this. But we're supposed to think about that. What are the ripple effects of Jake not being murdered? And Roland figures out, oh, this was not the day. He knows somehow it's some other day. It was close to the day, but it wasn't going to happen anyway, kind of thing. But then he hijacks Jack Mort and kills him. So the day never comes where Jack Mort pushes Jake. So this does not happen. And what are the bigger consequences? What changes? I guess we'll have to keep reading to find out. The other thing I want to say about this is I would love to say that this is all about Roland doesn't want to kill Jake again. And for sure that is true. He does not want to do that. But it's more about Walter here, because we're told it doesn't matter what the circumstances were. It could have been Jake. It could have been any other kid. It's Walter. When Roland sees the man in black, he loses control. And he just is like, I'm going to kill him. And that's what we've seen Roland do. I'm going to kill you every time he sees the man in black. So that's right. And it never works. He can't kill the man in black, seemingly. So I want to give Roland some brownie points here, but I don't think it's like this noble thing about how he would never hurt that child. It's more about his vengeance against Walter. So Roland is looking around in Jack Mort's mind, and he's like, oh my God, this is the man that killed Jake and then dropped the brake on Odetta and then pushed Odetta in front of the train. And so we also see what a horrible person Jack Mort is. He's a doobie, and he cleans up after himself, and he's very careful. He's like an accountant who has this very awful, dark hobby that he keeps very secret from everybody else. And sex is tied with violence again here. He's always getting off whenever he's pushing somebody, and so that's disturbing, but also quite a theme in the story. And Detta also, in this very same book, was creating violence and destruction and masturbating, and here we have same story, different character doing that kind of thing. And he's definitely a sociopath, because we're told that the grief, the screams, the pain of the people that he's inflicting these things upon, that's faint and unimportant to this character. So that's sick. All that matters is the pushing. King writes, what mattered was the thing which pushed change into the ordinary course of things and sculpted new lines in the flow of lives. And perhaps the destiny is not only of those struck, but of a widening circle around them, like ripples from a stone tossed into a still pond. Who was to say that he had not sculpted the cosmos today, or might not at some future time? And we read that and we're like, oh man, what a sick freak this guy is. But stop and think about it, not to add to his God complex, but that's exactly what he did, at least this time. He's not wrong. And dropping that brick on Odetta is what created Detta, who, when Odetta was pushed, we saw Detta came forward and probably saved her life. And then she existed to be drawn into Roland's world, and et cetera, et cetera. And so the whole entire universe, Roland's universe, the story's universe, was sculpted by that pushing of the brick. It's big, sick stuff, but it's not wrong. And I think I might have misspoke. I can't remember. But this is where he faints for the second time. So the first time it was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the Man in Black and I'm about to kill Jake. This is too much for me. That's who the third door is. And that was his first faint. And then the second time is when he realizes the connection between Jack, Odetta, Detta, or Jack, Odetta the first time, Odetta the second time, and Jake. And he's out. He's really knocked out for about 4 hours. And that's pretty bad given what Detta is up to on the other side of the door. And King writes, how long have I been out? He thought with sudden alarm. It was maybe 9 o'clock when I came through the door, maybe a little earlier. How long? He came forward. Jack Mort, who was now only a human doll controlled by the gunslinger, looked up a little, and saw the hands of the expensive quartz clock on his desk stood at 1:15. Gods, as late as that? As late as that? But Eddie, he was so tired, he can never have stayed awake for so... The gunslinger turned Jack's head. The door was still there, but what he saw through it was far worse than he would have imagined. Standing to one side of the door were two shadows. One, that of the wheelchair. The other, that of a human being. But the human being was incomplete, supporting itself on its arms because its lower legs had been snatched away with the same quick brutality as Roland's fingers and toe. The shadow moved. Roland whipped Jack Mort's head away at once, moving with the whiplash speed of a striking snake. She mustn't look in. Not until I am ready. Until then, she sees nothing but the back of this man's head. Well, she sees through his eyes, but maybe Roland forgot or something. I don't know. We're also kind of establishing that it's 1 o'clock here, but on the beach it's later. It's probably about 4 o'clock. So time is moving differently in these two worlds for whatever reason. Makes for a better story because it's getting later on the beach, the sun is gonna set, and then we have lobsters to contend with. And probably Eddie's death is what Roland is thinking, and he's not wrong. He's like, okay, this is a trap, and me going back there to save Eddie is exactly what she wants, so not going to do that right now. Okay. We got a lot of tension building, and the clock is ticking. Yowza, yowza. On to chapter 2, the honey pot, and we get back to Detta and Eddie on the beach. And we have, Detta had been watching Eddie. Remember, he was looking, he's like, I'm not going with you, Roland. I have to find Detta. And he's like, yeah, sure. Good luck with that. And he's calling, Detta, Detta. And Detta's watching all of this. So this is kind of where we start. And she's like, okay, he's going to fall asleep. I'm going to go kill him with the gun, drag him up here, go back down there, and then make Roland take me where I need to go. She knows she can't kill Roland. She figures out that if his body is dead on the beach, then Roland can't come back to it, and then he can't help her. So she's smart enough to figure that out. And her first instinct is to kill Eddie. But then she decides that she's not going to kill him with a gun, but then she's going to kill him with a rock. But then she decides, no, maybe I'm not going to do that. So we'll maybe talk about that if I remember to do it. But just like, what's Odetta's role in that? It does kind of make sense, and it makes for a much more interesting story on our end. But is Odetta in there somehow, like preventing Detta from killing Eddie? And now we have Detta being very smart, maybe, or maybe it's Odetta trying to get in there and just be like, figure out a way to get this bitch not to kill him. We never get Odetta's perspective inside of Detta, which wouldn't be crazy at all in this story. And I feel like King has written other books, I can't think off the top of my head, where somebody is kind of trapped in consciousness and we do get their perspective. But we don't get that this time, so we just have to wonder. But we will see later that Odetta definitely is in there. So to think that she's part of this decision making is not unreasonable. So remember, down on the beach, Eddie and Roland was like, come on, you got to come with me. And then he shot that gun, and it was a big surprise for Detta to have that gun go off. And then we learned that down on the beach, Roland was like, see, she's packing iron. There's bullets in this gun that work. These were the bad ones, and there's still bullets that work. Detta is like, okay, yeah, like sure, he's showing that to Eddie, but Roland knows that I'm watching. And so this is for me too, for me to know that he has bullets in that gun and that I should stay away from him. And that's probably true as well. We didn't get any of that from Roland's perspective, but that makes sense that he knew it was Detta. He knew it wasn't Odetta. He knew she wasn't dead. So it has to be Detta, and she's probably watching. That makes sense. So here's Detta reasoning her way into what she's going to do with Eddie. If that little show had been put on for her benefit, might not that really bad man have had another purpose in mind as well? One neither she nor Eddie was supposed to see? Might that really bad man not have been thinking, if she sees this one fire good shells, why, she'll think the one she took from Eddie does too. But suppose he had guessed that Eddie would doze off. Wouldn't he know she would be waiting for just that? Waiting to fill the gun and creep slowly away up the slopes to safety? Yes, that really bad man might have foreseen all that. He was smart for a honky. Smart enough, anyway, to see that Detta was bound to get the best of that little white boy. So just maybe that really bad man had purposely loaded this gun with bad shells. He had fooled her once. Why not again? This time, she had been careful to check that the chambers were loaded with more than empty casings. And yes, they appeared to be real bullets. But that didn't mean they were. He didn't even have to take the chance that one of them might be dry enough to fire. Now, did he? He could have fixed them somehow. After all, guns were the really bad man's business. Why would he do that? Why, to trick her into showing herself, of course. Okay, that's enough, but it goes on. This goes on for a few more paragraphs. Ultimately, Detta decides she ain't gonna fall for that shit, and that she doesn't need to shoot Eddie. She just needs to wait, and then she can brain him with a rock as he's sleeping. But I wanted to read that because upon this reading, Into the Scheming Mind of Detta, it really reminded me of another book. And when I thought about it, and a movie, I was like, oh dang, like this also features a man in black. And you're going to know it when I say it, but I'm going to say it. It's Name That Tune, dialogue version. The dialogue goes a little something like this. Now, a clever man would put the poison into his own goblet, because he would know that only a great fool would reach for what he was given. I am not a great fool, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of you. But you must have known I was not a great fool. You would have counted on it, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of me. So definitely a similar vibe there between the Princess Bride and Sean's character. Is he Vizzini? I don't know, but you know who I'm talking about, and wasn't even gonna try to imitate his rendition of that awesome scene. But isn't it just the same thing? Clearly I cannot choose the cup in front of me, and clearly I cannot choose the cup in front of you. And Detta's like, surely these bullets don't fire, but then they probably do, and Roland did it on purpose, but then maybe he didn't, because... So, thank you for letting me indulge myself on that a little bit. I hope you had a good time. She's figuring out what to do, and again, I already kind of talked about it, but I think Odetta's in there factoring in somehow. We don't clearly hear Odetta here, but it's not all like the Detta Walker talk anymore. And so this happened before, maybe, I don't remember which episode, where I was like, like my accent's going a little weird between like, what does Odetta say and what does Detta say, and how do they talk? Not that I'm great at either one of those, but distinct voices. And here it's like, it's kind of muddy, and it kind of sounds like Odetta at points, and then kind of like Detta at points. So we're still kind of just observing what's happening with these two women inside of the same body. Eddie gives up and he goes and sits by the wheelchair and he's all sad. And then Detta is like, oh, she's feeling a little something because Detta's in there loving this man. But Detta shuts it down. King writes, "No, you don't," she thought, having no idea who she was thinking about or speaking to. "No, you don't. Not this time. Not now. Not now. Not maybe ever again." She's not enjoying this, and she's serious, and she really mentally squashes the Odetta of it all back down into silence, or so she thinks. Eddie tries his best to stay awake there, but he falls asleep like the best of us in those situations. And here is Detta again, King writes. "She was surprised, disgusted, and frightened to feel a sudden stab of pity for the white boy down there. He looks like nothing so much as a little squirt who had tried to stay up until midnight on New Year's Eve and lost the race." And she remembered the way he and the really bad man had tried to get her to eat poisoned food and teased her with their own, always snatching away at the last second. At least until they got scared she might die. If they were scared you might die, why'd they try to get you to eat poison in the first place? The question scared her, the way that momentary feeling of pity had scared her. She wasn't used to questioning herself, and furthermore, the questioning voice in her mind didn't seem like her voice at all. "One meaning to kill me with that poison food. Just wanted to make me sick. Sat there and laugh while I puked and moaned, I spec." Here, it's a little more distinct. That question, why did they give you poison food in the first place? That sounds like Odetta. And very clearly, Detta moving into Detta speak in that second section. So I think all of that work that King did and that we did, psychoanalyzing all of this, saying that they have these very distinct voices, that's paying off right now, because we can see when we're in Detta's perspective that Odetta is definitely there and her voice is there, and then the Detta is still very there as well. But they're not just character swapping anymore. We're not just melding into each other. Detta has a clear voice and Odetta has a clear voice at the same time in this character's psyche. So they're moving towards this split, and then we see this union. I think it would have happened anyway, given enough time and the right circumstances. We'll never know, of course, but it does seem like they're on this trajectory already. We've seen it kind of be picking up speed and snowballing since the moment that they came through the door. So that's cool. One more thing I want to pull out of that is King saying that Detta wasn't used to questioning herself. She doesn't like it. Who does that remind you of? Way back when, the very beginning of The Gunslinger, it's one of the first things that we learned about Roland, where he's like, why am I questioning myself? Why am I thinking about the past? This is not like me. So I feel like that's kind of a nice echo of the Detta and Roland equivalent of it all, which we've just seen so much of here in this book. Detta watches Eddie fall asleep. She crawls down, picks up the rock on the way. She's going to smash him with it and then take his gun and make Roland take her back. King writes, "But as she approached Eddie, a disquieting thought came to her. It was another question. And again, it seemed to be another voice that asked it. What if he knows? What if he knows what you did the second you killed Eddie? He ain't gonna know nothing. He be too busy getting his medicine, getting himself laid too, for all I know." The alien voice did not respond, but the seed of doubt had been planted. So here it is again, very distinctly, Odetta, Detta responding. So we're seeing a thing happen here. And again, Detta showing up as this voice that Detta doesn't recognize, but clearly trying to keep Eddie alive while making it seem like it makes sense to the greater story. And Detta decides it does make sense. So the Odetta inside knows Detta very well on some level and is really getting her to think about it and say, oh yeah, like we learned that Detta was sleeping, faking sleeping, and overhearing Eddie and Roland talk about the tower, and how Roland said something like, I need you, Eddie, and I need this woman to get there. And Detta is like, okay, well, I don't think we read that passage out loud. I forget when it happened. Maybe we did. Anyway, that happened, and Detta is kind of like, that tower is what Roland lives for. And if he needs Eddie to get there, and if I kill Eddie, then maybe he can't get there. And if that's the only thing that he has to live for and he can't do it anymore, then he's likely to do anything. That crazy motherfucker. Mafa. And then she's like, I better not kill him. So funny how that works out. Very funny part that really doesn't have much to do with anything, but I like it, is when she goes down, she's not quite sure what she's going to do, but then she sees the rope in the wheelchair and she's like, aha, I'm going to make him a honeypot. But she stops and looks in the door while she's going about her business. And we get to see what she sees from her perspective. And King writes, she couldn't see who was holding the gun either. But then, she didn't really need to see the stick-up man, did she? She knew who it was. Sho. It was the really bad man. Might not look like him over there. Might look like some tubby little sack of shit. Might even look like a brother. But inside, it be him. Sho. Didn't take him long to find another gun, did it? I bet it never does. You get moving, Detta Walker. I love it so much because she's right. She's right. She doesn't know what's going on, but she looks through that door, and this is the part where he's holding up the pharmacist. But she's like, oh, like, obviously that's Roland. Didn't take him long to find another gun. Like, probably never does. Okay. So she ties up Eddie, and we get his perspective. Pretty bad here. He's being drugged down the beach, hog-tied, and it's a noose around his neck, and it's rigged in a way that when he tries to get free, like it chokes him. So we've talked about the civil rights movement a lot, and that's Odetta and Detta both having that passion to fight injustice. And the noose is a dark symbol of that time. I mean, all times, all racism in American history, but particularly during the civil rights movement. So that's there. He's going to try to call her Odetta like Roland did. Listen, Odetta. Well, that doesn't work when Eddie does it and makes her madder than ever. She flips out. And King says, say my whole name. Dangerous hysteria wavered in her voice. And at that moment, he was glad he couldn't see her. Detta Walker. Good. The noose eased a little more. Now you listen to me, white bread, and you do it good if you want to live till sundown. You don't want to be trying to be cute like I seen you just trying to snake down and get that gun I took off in you while you was asleep. You don't want to, 'cause Detta, she got the sight. See what you've gonna try before you try it. Show. Two things. Number one, she's making him say Detta Walker, say the whole name, and she's losing her shit, really. She's hysterical about it. And this is not about Eddie. This is pretty obvious. She's losing her sense of self. She's freaking out because she's hearing this other voice that she doesn't recognize. It's not like her. And so him having to shout, dead a walker, that's helping her validate, like, I exist, I'm a person, I'm here. Detta has the sight. What does that mean? Is that like the touch? I can see things before they're going to happen. Really? Or are you just saying that? Are you being cute? Is it funny? Or do you really? In this story, to say that we had one potential gunslinger who had a psychic power, yeah, and now we have another potential gunslinger who has a psychic power, why not? So I wonder, but I don't think I ever noticed that before this reading. Thought I would throw it out there for your consideration. Okay, so Eddie is the honeypot waiting for Roland to come back and save him. Race against the clock. Terrible, terrible situation for Eddie. And worst of all, in the hogtie, when he drops his feet, the noose pulls tighter, and it's just bad. It's just bad. So, leaving them on the beach, going back to chapter 3, Roland takes his medicine. Mort knows that Roland is in his mind, but Roland is like, this man is such a monster. He's so bad, worse than Walter had ever been, that he doesn't deserve communication. He doesn't deserve an explanation. King writes, the only way he could remain in the worm pit, which was this man's mind, was to regard him as no more than a combination atlas and encyclopedia. Mort had all the information Roland needed. The plan he made was rough, but rough was often better than smooth. When it came to planning, there were no creatures in the universe more different than Roland and Jack Mort. When you planned rough, you allowed room for improvisation. And improvisation at short notice had always been one of Roland's strong points. So this feels to me, it's kind of smacking of that intuition, instinct that we hear that about Roland. King tells us that a lot, and we see Roland knowing things, acting on things, or not acting on things that are his instinct, intuition, that maybe he should have acted on. So just improvisation feels like it fits that to me. Also an idea from the Gunslinger where we're told a few times Roland has no imagination, little imagination, and we thought about how when we did, that's not true. He has imagination. We saw him use it, and he's like, I can imagine not going after the man in black and taking Jake and going back and training him up. Like, that was a very vivid imaginal scene that he came up with, which he immediately dismissed as totally insane, but his imagination is intact. He's just not using it in the way that we would like him to. And in an improvisational situation, he does have to use his imagination a little bit. So just giving him some little brownie points for maybe exercising that part of his brain. He gets out of Mort's office building and he's out into the world. Another bit about Ka in here, so let's pull this out. King writes, somewhere between the echoing room, which is Mortsapedia, identified as a lobby, to wit, a place of entry and exit from the offices which filled this sky tower, and the bright sunshine of street. His Mortsapedia identified this street as both 6th Avenue and Avenue of the Americas. The screaming of Roland's host stopped. Mort had not died of fright. The gunslinger felt with a deep instinct, which was the same as knowing that if Mort died, their Kas would be expelled forever into that void of possibility which lay beyond all physical worlds. Not dead, fainted. fainted at the overload of terror and strangeness, as Roland himself had done upon entering the man's mind and discovering its secrets. And the crossing of destinies too great to be coincidence. So just Ka here again, their life force. Very solid use of the word Ka as their soul, spirit, life force being expelled forever. And then I love the void of possibility. Possibility for what? Which lay beyond all physical worlds. Again, this idea of the multiverse coming into play, the possibility of what? Like being another person? I don't know. We were just told like the possibility, the void of possibility. But isn't that a cool, it's like a lot of things, Michelle, but it's just cool. And I like to think about it. And I think it works well here on Dark Tower YouTube, where we weekly, bi-monthly, dive into the void of possibility of the Dark Tower. Okay. All right. Roland is using the Mortsopedia to get himself around New York City. It's great and also funny because the Mortsopedia, it's factual, but it's based on Jack Mort's knowledge of the world and opinions, and so it's kind of racist and mean at times, colorful. And that's funny. He gets to the gun shop because he needs ammunition because he's out of bullets, and his mind is blown because he realizes how he can buy 50 bullets in a box. Only problem is he doesn't have his card to purchase anything in the gun shop, and it's a law in New York City that you need this. And Jack Mort doesn't own a gun, so he's like, I think I know what he's talking about, but we don't have that. I don't know. So this is where Roland has to start improvising. He did see some cops outside before he came in, and this is how his plan's gonna start to roll. The clerks turned away. This is Fat Johnny Holden, and Roland drops Jack Mort's wallet on the ground, kicks it under the counter, and then he goes out to the cops and tells them this big whopping lie about how the tradesman, the tradesman, Fat Johnny, had stolen his wallet and pulled a gun on him, and Roland had seen the gun. Yeah. And so the cops, they wanted to bust his brother or cousin or somebody. So it's not the person that they really wanted to bust, but it's related. And when they know he's got a gun in there that he might not be allowed to have, and it's in a docker's clutch, as Roland says, or a spring clip, they're like, holy shit, we can bust this guy. So they're excited. They're going to go in and do the thing. But before that happens, I mean, the whole thing is just funny, but I like this part for more than just because it's funny. So this is Roland as Jack Mort telling the cops what happened in the shop. King writes, I took out my wallet. I showed him. Only when I turned my wallet around to do that showing, he must have seen there were quite a few, slight pause, 20s in there. I am a tax accountant. I have a client named Dorfman who just won a small tax refund after an extended pause litigation. The sum was only $800, but this man Dorfman is, pause, the biggest prick we handle. Pause. Pardon my pun. O'Meara ran the man's last few words back through his head and suddenly got it. The biggest prick we handle. Not bad. He laughed. Thoughts of robots and machines that played tic-tac-toe went out of his mind. The guy was real enough, just upset and trying to hide it by being cool. So very funny, and also just recognizing how good Roland is at his job. And we saw back on the airplane when he first enters New York. It was hilarious. And also Roland's making it work. And he's figuring things out very quickly and just adapting to this crazy situation around him. So here he is again doing that and recognizing that the way that he's speaking and just these weird pauses that are happening are making the cops a little wary of him. So he's reading the room. And Roland inside is like, I'm going to make a joke because that'll make them think things are okay. And he does, and it works. So this is Roland being Roland, being a badass gunslinger in the thought and communication and reading the room and just making it work out for him. So very cool. He follows them, the cops, into the shop. They're trying to figure out whether Fat Johnny took the wallet, but then they find the gun and they're like, aha, see this? And Roland is like, there, underneath of the counter, his foot is on my wallet. So they bend over, and then we're going to see Roland's rough plan starting to take shape. King writes, Roland took one final step forward. He cupped Delevingne's right cheek in one hand, O'Meara's left cheek in the other. And all of a sudden, a day Fat Johnny Holden believed had to have hit rock bottom got a lot worse. The spook in the blue suit brought the cops' heads together, hard enough to make a sound like rocks wrapped in felt colliding with each other. The cops fell in a heap. The man in the gold-rimmed specs stood. He was pointing the .357 mag at Fat Johnny. The muzzle looked big enough to hold a moon rocket. We're not going to have any trouble, are we? The spook asked in his dead voice. No, sir, Fat Johnny said at once. Not a bit. Stand right there. If your ass loses contact with that wall, you are going to lose contact with life as you have always known it. You understand? Yes, sir, Johnny said. I sure do. Good. Roland pushed the two cops apart. They were both still alive. That was good. No matter how slow and unobservant they might be, they were gunslingers, men who had tried to help a stranger in trouble. He had no urge to kill his own. But he had done it before, hadn't he? Yes. Had not Elaine himself, one of his sworn brothers, died under Roland and Cuthbert's own smoking guns? Okay. So I pulled that sequence out just to give a little flavor, a little re-taste for me of the storytelling here, which is just amazing, fast-paced, excellent, funny, fun, amazing. And we get this throwaway of Roland's like, oh yeah, and also I killed my best friend. Killed his mother. Killed one of his best friends. What did he have to do with Susan's death? I don't know, but the list is racking up a little bit, and just these casual mentions of murder. We shall see. Roland gets the ammunition. He does pay for it. He had some money, and he straps on the cops' gun belts. He takes two guns, one for Eddie and one for Odetta. Now, he loses those guns ultimately. He can't fit all the stuff in Jack Mort's underwear when he makes the trip back. But it's the thought that counts here. He's like, it's not just me anymore. There's two other gunslingers that I'm going to give guns to, with very optimistic thinking that we're all going to survive this and move on the quest for the Dark Tower. So we like that. We like that positive thinking. Roland, that's a nice change of pace. Of course, it serves him ultimately, but we're trying to give him some brownie points here. He's keeping us very entertained. So he's strapped on those gun belts, and Roland's like, I just feel more like myself. And we get this glimpse of Roland through Fat Johnny's perspective, which I want to read because I do feel like there's a little bit of mysticism in here. King writes, once Fat Johnny got another look at the geek in the blue suit and the gold-rimmed glasses, his mouth fell open. For a moment, he felt an overwhelming certainty that the man who had come in here had become a ghost when Fat Johnny's back was turned. It seemed to Fat Johnny that through the man, he could see a figure much more real. One of those legendary gunfighters they used to make movies and TV shows about when he was a kid. Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Butch Cassidy, one of those guys. Then his vision cleared, and he realized what the crazy nut had done. Taken the cops' guns and strapped them around his waist. With the suit and tie, the effect should have been ludicrous, but somehow it wasn't. He sees through the man that had come into the shop and gets this Roland vibe. He sees Roland, I think. And he's like, oh no, he put those gun belts on. That's all it was. I don't think so. He was certain that he was seeing through Jack Mort and glimpsing a gunslinger in all of Roland's glory in this moment. What do you think? And, okay, so we're at an hour. I'm about halfway through my notes. Let's pause here and get back to the next part, see what's going on the beach, or maybe we're going to get to the drugstore. So hang tight, my friends. We'll be back for the second half of the last part of the drawing of the three. I will see you in a few minutes, or hopefully in a few minutes, depending on how quickly I can do all of this. But until we meet again, regardless, may you have long days and pleasant nights.